Welcome to Cinemophile, where we bring you the best in independent, documentary, and foreign films, and we talk to the people who made them. I'm your host, Mike Caspar, and you can find out more about the program by going to cinemophilepod.com. More than an historical account, it is an intimate character story and a chilling reflection on American ideological fracture. Structured around the exclusive access to Sara Jane Moore, the film Suburban Fury unfolds as a first-person recollection filmed in the Bay Area locations where her radicalization occurred, interwoven with rare archival footage and a stylized, imagined dialogue with her FBI handler. This is something else. Suburban Fury, wherever you are, however you, whatever access you have to films, documentary films, please seek this out. We're joined today by the director of this incredible film, Robinson Devor. Robinson, welcome to Cinemophile.
Hey, Mike. Nice to be here. Thanks so much for the love.
Well deserved. Well, you've earned it. Again, as I mentioned to you before we got started, I knew Sara Jane Moore's name. I knew her attempted assassination on Gerald Ford. I'm old enough to remember a lot of this in real time. What completely floored me was this backstory, which is the essence of this film. Tell me a little bit about how this drew your attention at all, and at what point did you decide you had to do this film, Suburban Fury?
Yeah, I got a text from a friend of mine in San Francisco many years ago, and he said, you have to do this movie. And the movie he was suggesting was a movie about Billy Sipple, the person who prevented the second shot striking Ford in the crowd, person who was outed against his will in San Francisco. And I thought, wow, that is a great story about Billy Sipple. It's taught in journalism schools, and it's a tragic story, and he's a compassionate figure to look at. But he was not alive. And, I've made films where protagonists are not alive, and it really hamstrings you a little bit. So I realized that there was another story right next to it, which was Sara Jane Moore. And I think he even sent me that because she was getting out of jail. And I think he saw the news about her getting out of jail and looked at Sipple. And then I realized, okay, she's been doing all these 3-minute interviews for the Today Show and things like that, and you know how those things go. They're very truncated, and so you really didn't get much out of seeing her. But a great book was written, a very detailed, meticulously researched book on her had been written by Jerry Spieler, who is a journalist out of San Francisco, the San Francisco area, and so I read her book, and once I read her book, I was like, "Holy cow!" She is the real expert on Sara Jane, and so that gave me a lot of things that you could not Google. It was a big story for sure, and there was coverage of Sara Jane in all the major dailies, Washington Post, San Francisco Chronicle, New York Times, and for a couple of days, for a week or so. So there was a dense amount of coverage in 1975 after the shot. There was some, stuff that was on video about the attempt. But then the challenge was, well, we got to get Sara Jane to participate. It's probably going to be a crowded field of people maybe wanting to make this documentary because she was out of jail. We got to figure out how we're going to make this movie. We got a hold of her. Jerry was nice enough to give me her number or her email or her handler's email. She had a person in Washington, D.C. who was a kind of a political insider that she was working with to manage some of these things. I think that when I got a hold of her, I told her my background. I told her I wanted to do a long version of her story, an in-depth, and that I wanted it to be her story, and that's what she wanted too, is that she felt the press had never given her, the right perspective, or that had gotten the story wrong, and that her interactions with journalists were, not what she wanted them to be. And I said, that's fine. I don't like a lot of talking heads and people giving different opinions. I want you to tell your story. That's how we went forward. I'd made a film called Zoo, which was about somebody who died in a very embarrassing situation and was excoriated by the press. And I think I'm not sure if she ever watched it, but we did have a reputation as being compassionate to people who, to giving a voice to those who had been ridiculed or, lambasted in the press. So all those things, she ran it by the Secret Service, and the next thing you know, we were shooting in San Francisco.
My challenge, if you will, in talking to you is there are so many details. There's so many aspects. It's really like looking through a prism, watching her story, because every time she talks about something in her past, there's just a hint in the filmmaking of how much of this is accurate, how much of this is true. Now, a lot I would assume, and my own intuition tells me much of what she said is dead on true, but there's an element of doubt almost throughout the film about her. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yeah, I think that is a fair way to put it. I think Sarah Jane really wanted to be honest with about everything. But I also think that she said there are some things I'm just not going to talk about.
There you go.
And that's she spent time volunteering for politicians in California from the 60s on to the 70s, and I know for a fact she learned from them how to manage a conversation. And she's very good at it, and there's truth there, and there's things that if you don't say it the right way, she's not going to really respond to it. So it was a dance with her.
Having said that, there is an incredible amount of information that if you're at all familiar with this era, the issues around going back to Attica, going back to Sincue and the Symbionese Liberation Army, Patty Hearst, there's so many things that ring true to me. There's so many things that she said that were I didn't know, but fill in a lot of information that I can believe. I mean, if I hadn't lived through this period of time, I don't know how I would have reacted, but I can tell you, having lived through it, I appreciate the perspective. And if I thought anything didn't sync up, I would tell you, I would tell her, but I can't really punch too many holes in what she said. And the fact that she had access to the Symbionese Liberation Army and Sincue and Popeye Jackson is phenomenal given where she came from. And just there's so much. I don't. My mind is blown trying to describe all of this. To be
Well,
honest,
I tell you, I never fully felt the concept of biases until I worked with Sara Jane Moore, because she would say things to me like, "Oh, Randy and I were having lunch one day at the club, and he was telling me," and my bias was, what are you talking about? You're name dropping. This is really, but that was my bias to think incorrectly that there's no way that this woman, who she was, where she came from, as you said, could have had that access. But that's how formidable she was. She did have a lot of relationships. She was a curious, aggressive in connecting with the world.
she wasn't bashful. It's not something you would use to describe her. And what you're describing is Randolph Hearst, by the way, the Randy that
Yes,
you mentioned.
yes,
So
yes.
she traveled in those circles, and then she goes to Oakland to hang out with essentially the Black Panthers and gets involved with all of the most radical of those groups from that era in terms of black liberation, moving forward with an equal bringing equality to the African American community.
Well, let's break it down into the two sections. One is and she would agree with this. The first time she was involved with the Black Panthers was as a suburban do-gooder. And probably for her own cachet as a socialite, to bring the Black Panthers to her country club
Yeah.
and to speak to people at a dinner. and that made a great story, and that was opening her eyes and her neighbors' eyes. She also wanted to push some buttons in her conservative neighborhood. She was a little bit of she had a liberal streak in a conservative community. She wanted to push their buttons, and that was not unusual, as a do-gooder, to open up people's minds and to bring all these things that are so on incendiary in society into people's backyard. But then once she would also say the reason she truly became radicalized and became knowledgeable and was volunteering to work with the FBI as an informant, and that they pushed her into these circles. So there was, and as they say in the movie, she had a good name on the streets,
Yeah.
meaning she was a naive do-gooder in people's minds, so that people would believe that she was sincere and not working for the FBI. So it was a perfect situation.
It really, really is. If you were to construct the perfect informant who was willing to do something like this, it would look like Sara Jane Moore. That's what's so mind-boggling. Again, I'm not going to do justice to this film in the sense of trying to describe it, because the minute I start down one of these roads, I'm going to get caught up in a whole bunch of other things that are extenuating circumstances. Is it true? Is it not true? How does it play out? And as the film progresses and moves forward, you see these big stories that she had some version of impact on. It is, I'm not, again, I'm not going to do justice to this story, to this film, because you have to see this. Suburban Fury, please watch this film, because even if you aren't ancient like I am and have firsthand knowledge of this, it is just a wonderful review, trip down memory lane, but also filling in context that like I said to you before we got started, I did not have. And that's what is so crazy good about this film. I have left out the FBI, her handler, Bertram Worthingham. Do I have that right?
Worthington, yes.
Worthington, yeah. There's another whole element which is an incredibly important part of the film. But where is she now in terms of the Secret Service and all of that stuff?
Well, she passed away this year recently.
Oh, I did
Yeah,
not know.
yeah, she was quite advanced in age, and so she's in another place. She never got to see the final film, which is too bad. I can only imagine the things she might have had to say about it. Um,
Undoubtedly, she would have yelled at you at some point
well,
during.
I gotta say, honestly, this movie was, people talk about radical compassion and things like that, but every day I had to really open up myself and really try to really work on behalf of Sara Jane as a person, and to have some compassion for her, and to not, that's my job as a filmmaker. But I really tried, to give her a fair shot, and to not, and I think maybe she might have thought it was okay. We'll never know.
Well, I think she's honest about her own failings, her own shortcomings. She's honest about a lot of things that you would are a bit surprising, and honest to a point of, in terms of the people who she was working with, she seemed to have a pretty good grasp of what their agenda probably was when she was working with them, alongside them. But to be an informant during that period of time, as well as it's just hard to explain. I don't think like I said, I won't do justice to try to explain her because it's too complicated.
Yeah, she's you know when you talk to somebody, or you study someone, or you work with somebody, or somebody who has contradictory viewpoints, or their flags are planted in two different camps. One is taught as an artist or as a writer. That's the beauty of a human being, right? They're paradoxes. We don't make sense. And I know that we did talk to Gustav Weiland, who was the psychiatrist of the defense team, and he didn't make it into the film, of course, but he said that it was an interesting thing because I thought all people live with paradoxes and live with a tension within themselves, as Sara Jane Moore says. You're a person at work and you're a different person at home. And, we know from January 6th that's the case, right? And other things where people are one thing and then they're surprised that they're another thing. Politics, sexuality, the whole works. It's a common thing. But the psychiatrist who was a brilliant guy and a very generous guy to share his notes about the exam that he did for a week, in league with the state and the FBI. He used a phrase. He said, "You can't live betwixt or between," meaning you have to take a stand somewhere in life, or there will be dissonance and there will be disturbances. And I think that the mental history of Sara Jane Moore is the thing that is both important. It's also the thing that was used to discredit her, right? And so it's so complicated because you can look and see that she had some time with mental illness, mental breakdowns, time in sanitariums, some suicide attempts, and we can be very compassionate about that, and also realize the times she was living in. At the same time, it is something that is probably a result of some tension, obviously, of being one thing and trying to be the other thing at the same time, and it not jibing with the world. So, that tension, as my partner Charles Medady said, that those opposing forces created enough force to send a bullet flying towards the president. So that's just a long way of talking about somebody who's got very difficult to summarize. You've mentioned several times the story being incredible, and I got to just say that one would rarely come across a story this good that encompasses history, that has a protagonist like Sara Jane Moore, that is a storyteller like Sara Jane Moore, that has relevance to today's political violence. I mean, it was a staggering thing to find it. And matter of fact, at one point, this was a film that we took a long time to make, but I could see an entire history of the late 20th century revolving around Sara Jane Moore. Just you name it, just let her go down a path, and you're going to find something that you could attach to social history, politics, feminism, the works. And she would be she would be part of that conversation because of her life.
And to your point, the whole works. Access to power, access to the press, the FBI, the federal government, and all of the different cross currents within those different enormous bureaucracies, and how she was in some ways beholden to them at times in her life, but at the same time, she almost always either knew or she figured she had some advantages, something in her arsenal to be able to essentially make her own history, carve her own story out of all of this. Really, I can't imagine the feeling of knowing that you're an FBI informant, and then also knowing that you've gone to Oakland to try and help out the Black Panthers, and for all the right reasons, to help them because she believed in it. There's just too many. You're right. You're absolutely right. It's phenomenal.
You know what her secret weapon was? Being an accountant. She almost completed her master's degree in accounting at UCLA after she left one of her marriages. It didn't make it into the book, but that was what predicated some of her time in Los Angeles. She was married, and she got out of that marriage, and she was going down the path of being independent. And that was her career. She'd always had this career. That's what she wanted to do when she was in Danville. She wanted to work, and that's what her husband said she couldn't do. But it's funny, you learn so much when you make a documentary. I learned so much, and one of the things she goes, "I've been an accountant," and I go, I think we both were like, or Charles and I, when we were interviewing, our assumption was that, boy, that's kind of a boring job, and it's kind of a boring existence as people think about accounts. And she perked right up. She said, Oh no, it's the most exciting job in the world because you know exactly where the money goes and everybody needs an accountant. And she'd work for Barnum and Bailey Circus and for wine exporters and for all, she had all these clients. And you could see how and that's what she did for Randolph Hearst and for the Patty Hearst. She was an accountant. They needed somebody who could do that, and then her role expanded. But that's how you get involved with power, right? You get right into the money flow, and so that was her secret weapon.
If I were a college professor, and wanted to tell the history of the late 60s, early 70s, I would make this required watching because you can backfill what actually, quote unquote, actually happened around her life, but it gives you such a great overview in one person's life. It gives you like you were referring to, this amazing overview of American domestic politics during this period of time. It just,
I just wanted to address your thoughts about a fictionalized project.
yeah.
You know, this we always had the leeway to make a hybrid documentary. It was always something we had, and yes, we did work on some extended scripted elements, and they became quite large, living with the documentary footage. And yes, we did go out to big actresses, and but you know the process took 7 years. That's a big part of why this film took so long to make. And after a while, we decided that we wanted to return to a more pure form of documentary, which of course it's really not. It's pretty stylized in its own way. But I gotta say, Mike, that I'm so glad that we abandoned the fiction of Sara Jane Moore because it was pale. It really was. No matter, it was good script, it will be a great opportunity for an actress. I think a lot of people want to do a fictionalized version of this story, and I'm just so happy to have returned to the purity of seeking truth and living with details that you cannot, that get homogenized when you are crafting and crushing a fictional script together. It really is so satisfying to me to have returned to that. I got to give my partner Charles Medady a lot of credit to say, we have to stop this. There should be no recreations in this. You have the star of your movie right there in Sara Jane Moore. There's no way you want to have anybody competing with her. Nothing scripted, no actresses, nothing. So that's how we came to
Yeah.
this.
Well, I will tell you, Robinson, that I really liked her. I really liked her.
Oh,
No, I did. And I can only imagine, as someone who has gotten to know her over those many months and probably years that you worked on this with her, that you yourself, I'm sure when you learned that she had passed, that had to be a pretty emotional moment for you.
yeah. I feel she and I, you know, it wasn't the closest relationship, but I am indebted to her for trusting me to tell this story. And as I said, I did the best I could. It took a long time. I think she maybe lost faith that we'd ever finish it and ever get it out in the world. So it's a little tragic that we didn't get it out, that we got it out so late.
Just, I can imagine how difficult editing this would have been to get to the essence of what you were trying to do with this film. It's just, there's so much material here. It's incredible. Well, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for this amazing enterprise. Suburban Fury, what a great title too. What a great title for this. Because you see it and you go, what's that about? And then you look into it. I hope people will do that. I hope they pursue it in that realm. The film, again, Suburban Fury, we've been speaking with the director, producer, writer, and editor of this wonderful film, Robinson Devor. Robinson, anytime, let me know. Thank you so very much. Come back again, man.
A real pleasure talking to you, and thank you for all your insights and love for the film. I really appreciate it.
You have been listening to Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar, the place where you will hear from the best in independent documentary and foreign filmmakers. Please check out our previous interviews as well as upcoming interviews and special programming by going to cinemaphilepod.com. We are also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, searchable under Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar. Until next time, thank you for listening.